Entrando em contato com atendimento ao cliente... Para muitas pessoas é um jeito fácil de arruinar um bom dia. Mas na Zendesk, nós deixamos a experiência do cliente melhor. Melhor para sua avó, melhor para o seu vendedor preferido de flores, melhor para o cara do apartamento 3A, melhor para você, melhor para todos. Porque enquanto alguns dizem que o cliente sempre tem razão, nós dizemos que o cliente é sempre humano. E como seres humanos, queremos fazer algo melhor para todos nós. Zendesk, experiência do cliente com IA desenvolvida para humanos.
Quer desenvolver os talentos da sua equipe e potencializar os resultados da sua empresa? Conte com a expertise do atendimento corporativo do Senac São Paulo, que já capacitou mais de 1 milhão de pessoas e profissionais de instituições públicas, privadas e terceiro setor. Construa uma equipe altamente motivada e capacitada e destaque-se no mercado. Entre em contato, acesse sp.senac.br/corporativo e saiba mais. Quer saber? Senac.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game, with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. One should never apologise for laughing, Kieran.
Absolutely.
In dark times like this. The reason I was laughing, everybody, is because, as you know, my countdown wasn't working. So Kieran decided to inform me that we were actually recording by doing a big, cheesy 2 thumbs up and jumping up and down just to make sure I knew that we were recording. That tickled old Ernie. You okay, Kieran? How are you this Thursday morning? Thursday, isn't it? Yes.
It is. All is good. I'm starting to miss football now.
Yeah, I can't. Ed, I've never seen Ed so enthusiastic. It's literally, he wants a wall chart to count down the days to the wall chart. So we're trying to come up with an advent calendar type thing. It's just so... We've got Saturday worked out, what we're doing for each game and between each game. 3 games on Saturday, Kieran. It's lovely.
A special extra Palace excitement for watching England for you.
Of course, yeah. I did mention that. As you know, Kieran, I did a Q&A with the London branch of the Brighton Supporters Club on Monday night. So it was mentioned, the respective number of players in the England squad did come up. You'll be surprised to know it was me that raised it. And the word 10th was used on several occasions. Apparently, I'm told by your Brighton fans that you have, if you count the Copa America, you've got more players in international teams than we have. But I dismissed that as an irrelevance.
Mickey Mouse competition.
They were very nice people, your Brighton London. It's the whitest audience I've ever appeared in front of, Kieran, but they were lovely. They made me feel very welcome. And rather bafflingly, as a present, they gave me a cut glass Brighton pint glass. It was nice, really lovely thing, which I had to lie to them and say, well, I would display it, but my mantelpiece is full of awards. So I'm afraid it's going to be going into a cupboard. But it was lovely. But also, I think they invited me there to ask questions about you, Kieran, to be perfectly honest. That's all they wanted to know. What's Kieran really like? And you'll be pleased to know, Kieran, compared to them, you're an international playboy. It's Newsday, Kieran. Before we get into the news, I would suggest everybody that you put yourself an hour aside tomorrow for an interview with Trevor Birch, which we've just done, who we asked about a couple of these stories. It's a really, really interesting interview. And as you can imagine, a lot of it was about their current negotiations, shall we say, with the Premier League. I did have to tell Kieran off because he's wearing a T-shirt that says "You're a wrong'un," which probably he's been saving that for when we interview Lawrence Bassini, Kieran. I think Trevor was a bit taken aback when he flashed into view, like a sort of Star Trek commander flashed up on the screen to see you wearing your wrong'un T-shirt. Let's get into the news, Kieran. And it could be, Kieran, finally positive news for Everton.
Yes.
Oh, damn.
It's different news.
Right.
777 are now completely out of the equation, it would appear, and I think we've been sort of hinting at that for some time. It looks as if there are still 3 or 4 interested parties. John Textor, who's the part owner of Crystal Palace, he's sort of fading away, mainly due to the fact that he needs to be able to get a deal over the line in terms of selling his Palace shares first. And I think Farhad Mashiri is looking for a quick solution, or as quick a solution as possible, because, to be honest, the wages need to be paid at the end of the month. And Lang O'Rourke, who are the contractors for the new stadium, they need to be paid as well. Now, my view is I think Everton are probably okay at present because they will have had, I think, possibly the final instalment on the Richarlison deal. That's due at the end of June. They will have received their money from the Premier League in terms of the final facility and merit payments. That will come through this month. So I think we've got a little bit of leeway, but not a lot. So where do we stand? It appears that we have a new bidder who has come from nowhere, headed up by a guy called, apologies for my pronunciation, Vache Manokian. And this is a 400 million equity deal. Now, I'm indebted a lot here to sort of reading the epistles put out by our very good friend Matt Slater at The Athletic and Paddy Boylan. They seem to have as good an inside track as anybody, and they've done some absolutely splendid work. This is one of those, somebody who's come from nowhere, does appear to have a bit of a track record. There's always a concern about, and I think if anybody does listen, I really would encourage them to listen to Trevor Birch's interview. Doing your homework on owners, I think, is really important, and that's where the EFL have stepped up in the past 2 years, and hats off to them for that. This appears to be some sort of consortium headed up by this guy. What does 400 million of equity mean? Does it mean that's going to be fresh shares issued by Everton Football Club? Is that 400 million going to Farhad Moshiri? I'll be very surprised if it was. So that's one position. The next is that you've got two Everton season ticket holders, Andy Bell and George Downing, who have already lent Everton around about 50 million quid as sort of necessary capital. They are trying to put together a bid. They have been both successful in their own right. Do they have the money to deal with everything? I suspect they're looking for loans. And I think it has been hinted here that they could perhaps be looking at people such as Michael Dell's MSD Holding. So people say, oh, Michael Dell, one of the 20 richest person on the planet, this is his investment arm in exactly the same way that San Francisco 49ers investment is separate from the 49ers. So it doesn't mean that you're going to get an American multi-billionaire coming into the equation directly. So they would need, I think, some sufficient additional financing. And I think there's at least one other who have sort of hinted, but as we have seen before, if you want to get people to know who you are, you say that you're bidding for a famous football club. Various people crawled out of the woodwork in respect of Manchester United and Chelsea historically when those clubs are up for investment. So you always have to take these things with a pinch of salt. I think the good news for Everton is 777 are completely out of the discussions now. The continued not good news is that it's Farhad Moshiri's decision. He, from what I've seen, is still asking for a substantial amount of money. And we're talking tens of millions of pounds, when I think there's a very good case for him saying, I will sell all of my shares in Everton Football Club for £1. I might perhaps caveat that and say I'll share in some of the financial success in the future, because there is so much debt associated with the club that the shares by themselves are effectively worthless. But he seems to think different. He might end up with a nominal sum to make him feel that he's got something out of this. So that's where we are. It's going to be a long summer for Evertonians, but I still think they're in a better position than they were under the perspective of 777.
I think the John Textor thing is definitely dead in the water, and the current Palace conspiracy theory is that he only did it in a bid to flush out Harrison Blitzer to try and get them to buy his share of the club. Two questions, though, Kieran. What exactly is an equity deal, and is £400 million a fair value for Everton? Because it seems, looking at the value for some other clubs, that a traditional club like that with potential success, brand new, lovely ground, would be worth more.
Yeah, I mean, an equity deal means putting money into the club in the form of shares. Now, the advantage of that is that you're not having to pay interest. If you take a look at Everton's accounts, they have borrowed large sums of monies from corporates who are charging them large amounts of interest. Then, in terms of this 400 million bid, and all I get is nobody's able to give a correct explanation as to exactly what this means. It's not a case of paying 400 million for Everton. It's a bit like me saying, I'll buy your house off you, Kevin. I'll give you 400 grand. and you say at the same time, and you have to take over my mortgage. So when you're buying the club, so the owner is potentially getting money, or the club is potentially getting money, and you're also inheriting all of the debts. And those debts, we think that Rights and Media Funding, who are this very strange company based in Cheshire with 0 employees, appears to get all of its money from some Cayman Islands BVI place. They're in for 200 million. We think 777 are in for 200 million. We've got MSP in for 158. Mashiri, I think we've got to write off what's owed to him. But you're inheriting all of the debts of the club, as well as this and that would value Everton at close to £1 billion or more. And to me, that looks very high. If you think that Newcastle United went for 300 million 3 years ago.
Yeah, fair point. I don't know what a BDI place is, Kieran, but it made me think of Liam Gallagher. So I'm going to spread the rumour that Liam Gallagher is buying Everton now. I got one of your moody yeses when I suggested it was good news for Everton. So I'm slightly concerned what I'm going to get when I say that this might be good news for Reading.
Yeah. Slightly more positive. The Reading owner, Di Younger, did have an exclusivity period with an organisation which nobody seemed to be able to find anything about. I think they were called Chiron. That deal has lapsed. And the latest thing that we're hearing is that I think the former QPR player, Mark Bircham, he is involved with a consortium of US and Saudi investors. So people will get giddy perhaps at Reading, because there is an assumption, I think, from many football fans that every single person from Saudi Arabia is a multi-billionaire. Yeah. Well, Sheffield United fans will say that's not the case. We've got a Saudi owner, and he's not been putting his hand in his pocket. So we'll have to wait and see. It comes down to two things. First of all, from the sales side, will Di Younger accept 30 million for a League One club? That's probably a half decent price. I do appreciate that Reading has got plenty of real estate assets which are valuable. And then going back to our discussions with Trevor, it's then up to the consortium to be able to prove A, that they have the money, and B, where the money comes from, and without sort of preempting. If you can show the money, there's not a problem. It's always been the case. It's where people say, "Oh yes, yeah, it's been promised by my grandmother who lives in Borneo, and her internet connection is not very good." You go, it doesn't sound. So does it pass the smell test? Yeah. In terms of where the money's coming from, and then can they effectively provide proof of funding for the next 2 years? So it's good that there is somebody interested. I've always felt that there would be somebody interested. I've been marketing Reading as a London club. It's on the flyover for Heathrow, so it's close enough. If Watford markets itself as a London club, then why can't Reading do the same? So that's very attractive to potential owners. It's a nudge forward rather than leap forward.
If you can hear a slight rumble of thunder in the background, Kieran, that's my dear old dad, God rest him, taking umbrage at you suggesting Watford are a London club. As when he went to his deathbed going, Watford are not a London club. He wouldn't like the idea that Reading are a London club either. No. Watford should not be cluttering up space on the big match. Mark Bircham, of course, Kieran, a Canadian international, and such a QPR fan, he used to dye his hair blue and white. So he's picked the right club then, because if he's kept his hair blue and white, he's on the right track. So that's qualified good news for Reading, yes. which is at least that sentence has got the word good news in, and that's the first time in 2 years that Reading fans have heard us say that. So a lot of our discussion with Trevor Birch, Kieran, of course, was taken up with their negotiations with the Premier League. And we've got 4 stories, Kieran, 4 about Premier League governance and finance. And you mentioned that £30 million bid for Reading. The Premier League have spent £30 million in a slightly unusual way, Kieran, this season, or last season.
Yes, I think the phrase is trebles all round at the houses of many sports lawyers. It looks as if, and this was from Martin Samuel in the Times, the Premier League has spent almost £30 million, it would appear, this season in respect of taking legal counsel, legal advice with regards to prosecutions, commissions, with regards to its own clubs. And this is excluding Manchester City. So
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite staggering. The Premier League does have legal costs to deal with on an annual basis. I'm not denying that. And it's got to protect its own intellectual property and the interests of members and so on. So, by all accounts, the Everton's first hearing cost close to 5 million. And I'm thinking, well, that didn't actually last very long.
No.
But I think it was something like 40,000 documents were prepared by both sides. So it's the work which is undertaken before the hearing is heard, which racks up the cost. Apparently, again, reading Martin's article, they recovered 1.6 million of that. Now, I don't know whether that had to come out of the coffers of Everton or where it comes from, whether they've got some sort of insurance policy. But that would seem a bit strange. So, if they're paying £30 million on legal costs with regards to its own clubs, it does seem that they're kicking up such a fuss about the £8 million that it's going to cost for the Premier League share of the regulator costs.
Yeah.
And the £400 million that the clubs individually were quite happy to spend on agents.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. It's an expensive business. People will say, well, I don't recall football being like this when I was wearing short pants. That was the case, but the reason why we've got big zeros on the legal bills is because the Premier League is a £6 billion a year business, and it's a £6 billion, and it's not a united business. It's increasingly factionalized. It's increasing infighting that we're seeing because when there's more money to be shared, people don't like sharing. I've always found this a really intriguing thing. If the cake's bigger, everybody can still get a decent slice of the cake and do very well for themselves. Everybody then starts saying, I want just a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more.
Hark at you communist. And no wonder people are not listening to us in America, Kieran. You're espousing that sort of lefty commie. It's interesting as well, as one of the things Trevor Birch told us as well, is they're not negotiating with the Premier League. They're negotiating with 4 Premier Leagues because there's no one in the Premier League who can agree what it is they don't want to give to the EFL. They just all know they don't want to give something to the EFL, but they're not convinced what it is. And talking of work being undertaken before legal action, Kieran, brings us to Manchester City, and I'm sure Man City fans won't mind that they're currently the least popular club in the Premier League. But senior figures at the Premier League have had to hand over a lot of information relating to the 115 charges against Man City. So we're in a COVID inquiry situation here where people will be going, I lost those WhatsApp messages. I've only got the ones from my wife telling me to bring some lamb in for dinner.
Yes, this is part of the process, and the hearing in relation to Manchester City is taking place as we're recording this. It looks like it will take place over around about a 2-week period. So it's all to do with the communication within the Premier League, internally and also with clubs. And it's an awkward one because should an organisation keep records of all transactions? There is a case for saying that. But as we saw during COVID, it looks as if we've now got government by WhatsApp. If we take a look at what's happened with the Rebecca Vardy versus Colleen Rooney case, again, there were WhatsApp issues there. WhatsApp is a great form of communication. It's a secure form of communication, and that's why we like it until somebody says, can I see that secure information? and then things start disappearing. But as part of Manchester City's position against the Premier League, it has asked for access to communications. Part of Manchester City's case is that they feel there is a group of clubs who are acting in self-interest, who want to take Manchester City down. And everybody acts in self-interest. So it doesn't make those clubs bad or Manchester City bad or anything. I think people are getting very judgmental on this, but it's going to be a sensitive issue, and it's going to take up quite a lot of time to first of all request the information, and then to get that communication across, and then to review it, perhaps with follow-up questions. So going back to our previous story, the £30 million of legal costs, in the words of, I think it was Bachman Turner Overdrive, you ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to the Premier League's legal bill for next season. Yeah.
And of course, Kieran, as we know, if your phone is at the bottom of the English Channel, then those messages are fairly secure.
Yes.
This is a paid advertisement from BetterHelp Therapy Online. How's your year been so far? I don't know about you, but sometimes it feels like everything happens so fast and life can be a bit of a blur. When that happens, it's vital you take a moment to celebrate your wins and make adjustments for the rest of the year. Talking to family and friends or podcast pals can be great, but therapy can help you take stock of your progress and set achievable goals for the next 6 months.
If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you need to do to get started is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. Once you get started, you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge.
And with over 1,000 therapists in the UK already, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise in mental health. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/price. That's betterhelp.com/price.
Hi, I'm Steve Lemack, and every week I'm joined by Music Ally's Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge, on The Price of Music, the weekly podcast all about the money behind the music industry. In each episode, we discuss the very latest goings-on in the music business and dig into the finances behind the big stories.
So whether you're a music lover who just wants to know more about what really goes on in the industry, or you're an aspiring musician, manager or label owner who wants some inside knowledge on how Spotify's financial model really works, or what the future holds for independent live music venues, this is a show for you.
Subscribe to The Price of Music in your podcast app now. See you soon.
This story about the Premier League, Kieran, is arguably the most important one, and yet, I must say, much to my surprise, it hasn't really reached the headlines, but the Premier League clubs have agreed to keep the existing profitability and sustainability rules, but also look at other ways of distributing the money.
Yes, at the most recent Premier League, they sort of have an end of season gathering for a couple of days. It all becomes a little bit Miss Marple-like, because everybody's so busy stabbing each other in the back. It can't be a very pleasant experience. But Aston Villa put in a suggestion that the £105 million PSR limit over 3 years be extended to £135 million. And I've spoken at length before that we've had no index linking of the PSR position since it was introduced over a decade ago. Why are Villa doing that? Well, okay, let's be honest, they're doing it out of self-interest. And part of that self-interest is that they sold Jack Grealish for £100 million to Manchester City 3 years ago. And the way that PSR works, he's an academy player, so they got £100 million worth of profit. So they got £100 million contribution to their PSR calculations for 3 seasons, and that drops out of the equation next season. So Villa, we might have to. Okay. And Villa's owner, Naz Sawiris, he's done a long interview in the Financial Times, and he's made it very clear that he views PSR and I've been saying this for years. It's nothing to do with profitability or sustainability, because it encourages loss making, and sustainability is. So I've always not liked the title. Just I don't like the title financial fair play. There's nothing fair about it.
Yeah, fair point.
His argument is that the rules are there as a form of protectionism for the larger clubs, the established clubs, the clubs who are used to an automatic place in the Champions League, and therefore it's anti-competitive. So given that he failed because this proposal, I think there was perhaps only one club voting in favour of it. So it didn't get much traction. Is he now going to consider legal action to say that the rules in general are unfair? And we've got sort of Manchester City Mark II about to take place. So that was one thing. And then Steve Parish of Palace, of course, he, I think, is one of the driving forces, along with Arsenal, for this idea of anchoring, which we've discussed. And it looks like that's going to run in shadow to the existing PSR rules. So i.e., they're not actually going to be applied this season, but they're going to be keeping a spreadsheet to say, well, if anchoring was taking place, would it actually have any impact? and then they'll reassess it in 12 months' time. I mean, I've done a similar exercise myself, and it would have an impact on some clubs. So that's where we are there. So yeah, it sounds like it wasn't a short meeting. It wasn't one of those let's just do an hour and a half each morning and then knock off for a round of golf in the afternoon at Premier League HQ.
You talk about Villa possibly taking legal action. They're going to have to get hold of this tyranny of the majority thing. They're going to have to sort themselves out with this. Now that they're all going on about it's the tyranny of the majority now. It's democracy. Is how it works. Just very briefly, Kieran, for new listeners, could you talk us quickly through anchoring?
Yeah, the way that anchoring works, and I think the one thing which has come out of that meeting is it looks as if there's going to be a 5 times anchor. So what you do is you say, how much is the TV money generated by the club that finishes bottom of the Premier League? So in the most recent season, in 22-23, the figures we got, Southampton got £103 million in TV income. What you then do is that you multiply that by 5, so that takes us 5 times 103 takes us to 515, and then you say, right, the most you can spend, most that any club can spend on wages, amortisation, agents' fees, and impairment, less player sales, is going to be that figure. You can see why some clubs would be keen on it, because if I was Villa or Newcastle, I think those are the 2 clubs who are owned by very high net worth or sovereign wealth funds, that means that they can spend as much money on wages in theory as Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, and so on. But it ignores the fact that UEFA have got a different set of rules which cause an extra complication.
So that shadowing is something we can keep an eye on next season then, isn't it?
Yeah, as the results come out. Yeah, cool.
And the final Premier League story, Kieran, is in relation to the sale of club assets.
Yes, we've seen Chelsea sell a hotel which allowed them to stay within the parameters of the PSR totals in 22-23. And last week, I was contacted by a well-known broadcaster who said, we want you to take a look at the accounts of 6 clubs who we think might be close to breaching PSR in 23-24 to try to work out whether they need to sell any players by the 30th of June, because 30th of June is your financial cut-off date. So I did this, and it went up on the website of said well-known broadcaster, only for a club. We won't mention them, but Todd Bowley is one of their owners. to throw an absolute hissy fit and say that's absolutely outrageous. And my comments about Chelsea were very measured. I always try to be objective. That's what you should do. You shouldn't be partisan if you're going to do any form of analytical work.
Yeah, of course.
And they forced said broadcaster to take down the story.
Wow,
which seemed a bit strange. It then comes to light that Chelsea may have sold a few more properties during the current season. May have. We don't know. We'll have to wait until their accounts come out. But there was a proposal, and to align the Premier League with the same set of rules that exist in the Championship, along the lines of, if you sell a property asset, you cannot include the profits as part of your PSR. And that's absolutely right. How can you have a sustainable football club if you go and sell your stadium? That's not sustainability. Yeah. It's a bit like me saying, oh, yeah, I need to go and buy some groceries. I'm going to sell my house. That doesn't work on a long-term basis. So this was put forward. I think the wording wasn't very good, which caused 1 or 2 issues. So when it went to a vote, 11 clubs were in favour of closing the loophole. That's not enough to get through. You have to have a 2/3 majority. You have to have 20. Yeah. So therefore, it has lapsed. And it makes the Premier League look, A, divided, which I think everybody accepts that the Premier League is divided.
Yeah.
But B, I'm not saying it's a vote of no confidence in the executive, but it's effectively saying the executive who put forward this as a suggestion, look, it is a loophole. The EFL don't have the same rules. The UEFA don't have the same rules. UEFA's calculations are far more restrictive. You're just doing this to try to circumvent the position. And the club said, well, stuff you. We still want to be able to do it. So it doesn't look too clever.
I was disturbed, Kieran, to hear from some of the Brighton fans in the room the other night that a few of them currently hate Chelsea more than they hate Palace. I have to say, I took umbrage. I launched into a 5-minute invective against Brighton in order to get them back on track again. So I can't be having that, Kieran. But I don't think they're the only set of fans that are taking against Chelsea at the moment. And I think some Chelsea fans would be taken against the way Bowley is behaving as well, wouldn't they?
I think fans are fickle. If you deliver if you deliver in Champions League, if you deliver trophies, then
fair point.
Then fans will turn a blind eye. I'd include myself in one of those Brighton fans that dislikes Chelsea. It certainly wasn't helped by when Brighton played Chelsea at the Amex this season. Chelsea won, no issue with that, but that was towards the end of the season. The level of homophobic abuse took me back about 30 years, and I just thought, you're not helping yourselves here. You can celebrate a victory. You can take the mickey out of us.
Yeah.
Absolutely, no problem whatsoever. And you do it to me, and I do it to you, and we've still got respect for it. But don't go that particular route. My sexuality is not a reason to make me better or worse than anybody else.
Quite right. Well said. This next question, Kieran, about League One, League Two salary cost management protocols. I was intending to ask Trevor Birch, but let's be fair, it would have been a slightly complicated question, and I was far too busy unsuccessfully trying to tempt him into a headline anti-Premier League statement, which he was way too clever to do, although his sentiments about the Premier League are only too clear when you hear the interview. So perhaps you can tell me about these revised and updated salary cost management protocols in Leagues 1 and Leagues 2, Kieran.
Okay, for those people not familiar with the present position, if you are in League 1, you can spend 60% of the money coming into the club on wages. And if you're in League 2, 50%. However, that's still not working particularly well, because if you take a look at the average losses being made in League 1, which have shot up in the last season or two, the average losses, I think last season, were 5 million, and the average losses in League 2 in the quoted article was 1.6 million. So I think what the EFL has done is agreed to go away, have discussions with clubs over the course of the summer and say, can we come up with something which is more sustainable? It's tough enough to be in the Championship where you're losing £1 million, £2 million a month. But you can, to a certain extent, you can say, well, the reason why they're doing it is because come the start of August, we're 46 games away from the Premier League, and therefore we're willing to overspend to try to get there. It does seem that in League 1, to be losing £5 million a year, that's pushing it quite a lot. And therefore, perhaps we need to have some sort of review. It looks as if the current rules are not working as they were intended. And part of the reason for that is something called football fortune. And how football fortune works is that for every £100 an owner puts into the club in the form of fresh shares, you can spend an extra £100 on wages. And quite a few owners are putting in more than £100.
The 10% differential between League 1 and League 2 will stay, though, will it, whatever they decide to revise it?
I think everything is open for discussion. They might move to something similar to the PSR rules, for all we know. But my only concern there was, would that result in an increased administrative burden for the smaller clubs in Leagues 1 and 2?
Kieran, here's some good news. Here's a sentence I didn't expect to say. Ron Martin has broken his silence again. Ron Martin has spoken to someone. Unfortunately, not us or journalists. He's spoken to a group of Southend fans who were surrounding his house. So he didn't have a lot of choice, but he has actually spoken to Southend fans at last. I'm almost tempted to break out the again, because this is a big breakthrough.
Yes, and as I think you rightly said, it was out of necessity rather than desire.
I'd say.
But the Shrimpers, I think we've got an interview with the Shrimpers Trust coming up in a few
weeks' time, yeah. No, with a Southend fanzine, sorry.
Fanzine, sorry, yeah. I was all at sea, yeah.
We've got the Shrimps Trust, Morecambe fans coming up, and then we've got the Southend fanzine coming up.
Yeah, this causes far too much confusion for me.
Yeah, that's if the Southend fanzine are out of Ron Martin's garden by then, of course.
I might phone in from there.
Oh, that's a good idea, yeah, if you just hear the sound of tink breaking glass in the background. All right, lads, calm down.
So the reason why there has been a protest is that the deal to sell the club has not progressed.
Yeah.
Ron Martin is saying this is partly due to the fact that there's been a change in the council. We've moved from a Conservative-controlled council to a Labour-controlled council at Southend, and he's saying, well, the new council need a bit of time to go through the fine print. I'm going, well, that sounds a bit strange to me.
Bollocks.
And the consortium, who have put quite a bit of money into Southend to keep the lights on since they exchanged contracts. I think they exchanged contracts in December. They are talking about walking away. There's still a couple of outstanding winding up orders, one of which is ironically from Ron Martin's legal advisors. And then the thing which tickled my ivories the most of all was Ron Martin said to the fans outside, "Don't worry, lads, you can trust me." And he did that with a straight face.
Did he?
Yes.
Oh, good for him. Well done, Ron. Yes. I'm very much looking forward to that Southend fanzine thing. I mean, we might take our bad language filter off, Kieran, just let them run with it. I think it's fair to say, Kieran, I know it sounds like we're plugging this Trevor Birch interview a lot, but it is worth listening to. But I think the most difficult question for him to answer, Kieran, and to be honest, the most difficult question for me to ask, came from a recovering gambling addict who explained the emotions and how difficult it was for him to watch EFL games because of the constant barrage of gambling adverts from a league that is sponsored by a gambling company. So this next story about the SPFL's new sponsorship deal is one that I think Trevor would be interested in as well.
Yes. So the SPFL have announced a new 5-year sponsorship deal, a new title sponsorship with William Hill, who are, as we know, a bookmakers.
Yeah.
And we've been through this particular avenue on many occasions. Why is that there's such a close relationship between gambling and football? It's because it works.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It works for the gambling companies. I've tried with Freedom of Information requests to find out just how much money they spend on marketing their products with the TV companies. They've got nowhere with that. So SPFL, as Trevor would say, we have a responsibility towards our members, all of whom are losing money, to get the best deal possible. It happens to be from a gambling company. Gambling is legal. We've had this discussion. Trevor is equally nonplussed as you are about the fact that I bet on Brighton to lose. I've got 50 quid on us to be relegated next season. Not signed anybody, not got a new manager, I've got a lump on, so.
Yeah. Also, I think it's fair to point out, Kieran, that when we interviewed Neil Doncaster, head honcho of the SPFL last year, he was surprisingly robust in his defence of the sponsorship by gambling companies, because he said we're short of money and it's not illegal.
Yeah.
And while those two things are there, and God knows, Kieran, we know the difficulties of funding football clubs, football leagues. So you can't blame them. But as I said, Trevor, there are rumours that Palace are going to be sponsored by BK8 next season, and if that's the case, I will be immensely disappointed. And I think most football fans have now reached a stage when, yes, we all, I will bet. I've got a £10 a week limit for horse racing on a Saturday. You have a flutter on football. Many of our listeners do, but I think we've all reached a stage where we're also very aware of the difficulties for those people who do gamble, and it's, but again, we're just going over old ground, Kieran. But while the betting companies are there and they can afford to do it, then they will sponsor. As we said to Trevor, the really annoying thing is that football isn't making as much money out of gambling as it could do.
Yeah,
because until there's a levy, horse racing is pretty much funded by the levy they impose on gambling, and football just doesn't do it.
Well, this was one of the suggestions I put forward to when I was doing one of my presentations to people at DCMS and so on. And I think it's fair to say that the gambling industry has the ear of ministers.
Yeah.
So that one didn't get very far.
Yeah, fair point. Still in Scotland, Kieran. This looks like good news. I'm looking forward to the yes from this, but Dundee, is this good news?
It looks as if, some potential changes in ownership. Dundee have lost a wee bit of money in recent years, so they've racked up a few debts. But Football Partners Scotland, to whom I think they owe some money, they have now had or encouraged an emergency general meeting at Dundee where the shareholders have voted to effectively tweak the constitution in such a way that the loans from Football Partners can be converted into shares, which effectively means that there's no obligation to repay them. There's also talk about ALK, who are Burnley's owners, and Burnley have sort of one of these entente cordiales with Dundee in the sense that they a knowledge exchange, and I think some Burnley players have gone on loan to Dundee and so on to try to get them some more sort of match day experience and so on. That Burnley's owners would now be in a position under sort of the slightly tweaked constitution for themselves to consider an investment, and if that is the case, then fair play to them. It's a chance for Dundee to try to get into a position where they can be more competitive, and that's what all fans want.
And Inverness, Caledonian, Thistle fans, Kieran, have been very worried in the last couple of weeks, and we're hoping to speak to one of them next week. But this looks like it might be better news for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's some senior people at ICT who have resigned at board level, so that is a cause for concern. But the club has lost money. I don't know how much money the club lost, I think, in 23. I don't think they've published their accounts, which means that they go on to my personal naughty step.
Yeah.
But clearly there have been challenges. The fans have distanced themselves from some of the suggestions put forward by the board as cost-cutting exercises. I think one of those was to transfer the training facilities to Kilty Hearts, which is further south.
Yeah,
and saying, well, it's too far to expect players to come. Housing in Inverness is too expensive. We can't attract players. And fans are saying, well, look, this is an Inverness football club, not a phoned-in club from somewhere else. That's where we are in respect of that. They say they're in talks with potential investors. It's always good to talk, but the fact that these investors are presently quite vague, we don't want them to be the usual energy drink sellers who sell a product which appears you can only buy in one shop in the whole of the country, as has been the case with some of the other bids that we've seen for other clubs.
Yeah, and also well done for saying a wee bit of good news to show that you're down with the Scottish language. Well done, Kieran. And our last two stories take us to Europe, sort of, Kieran. And the first one involves UEFA, I imagine, being very happy that it's resolved an issue with Nice and Manchester United both appearing in Europe. Yes,
there has been sort of a transitional agreement for one season only with regards to Manchester City and Girona, who are part of the City Football Group, and Ineos having significant stakes in both Nice, which it controls, and Manchester United, where it's got a 27% stake, but is in control of football operations. Those transitional arrangements was that there would be the setting up of what we refer to as a blind trust, i.e. effectively you appoint non-executives who will control transactions between the two and make sure that there are objectives followed. Because what you don't want is the two clubs being grouped together and we end up with some sort of very convenient final fixture. And now I think your dad, you said, had a solution to that, which involved heating the balls in the drawer.
It's easy enough to do. He was convinced that happened every time in the FA Cup. You just blow on one of the balls and, that's Arsenal, right? That's not coming out. That's fine. Rather late in the day, Kieran, and this is our last story, rather late in the day, considering it starts on Friday, UEFA have confirmed the prize money for Euro 24.
Yes, there's going to be over €330 million to be shared between the participants. Just for qualifying, you get, I think, €9.25 million. I can't imagine any player wanting to do anything other than wear the shirt of their country. It must be such an incredible feeling. But if there is a victory in the group stage, you get €1 million, €500,000 if you draw. If you get to the round of 16, 1.5. If you win it, you get an 8. So what I worked out is that if you win the tournament and you win all of your matches, that will mean that there'll be €28 million going to the Football Association of the winning country. clearly some of that money will be distributed to players, but it could also be a windfall for individual FAs in terms of how they choose to operate their activities, money potentially going back into grassroots and so on.
Do you know what? This is something, Kieran, I might ask you as a question myself on the next point. I've just been reading this fantastic biography of Alf Ramsey, and in particular around the 66 World Cup, a chap called Duncan Hamilton, I think. It's astonishing how little money the players who won the World Cup for England got compared to how much the FA officials trousered. So I might actually ask you to look into it. I think it'll make an interesting question. It's really astonishing. I'd love to see a comparison of what England players get now. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that'd be very kind of you. It will get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. And you know where to go. You go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you've got a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And you can go to the same website if you'd like to buy our book, which is coming out in paperback soon. And don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter, X, whatever, and YouTube. So we will be back on Tuesday with our next questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you as always for everybody for getting in touch, for keeping us up to date with stories as well. You often provide us with the initial kernel of an idea where we go away and we look and see if we can get a full story out of this. So we do appreciate that. And also to everybody at Patreon who is contributing, getting advert-free shows for as little as £3 a month. That may tickle your fancy. There's another way of supporting the podcast, and that's to give us a review. We don't quite understand how the system works, but it does, according to Producer Guy. And you can write whatever you want. So you could even say you would rather have the show presented by Steve Dale and Trevor Birch.
Oh my word!
I think that could be quite a feisty one.
That would be a cracker. That would be a really good one. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.